Imagine a world without choices. Imagine you can't make your own decision. That wouldn't be a world for me. That wouldn't be a world for you. You, I see.
Tell them we're gonna be stronger. Together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. Gonna be stronger together. Time we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. It is a natural right for every human being to be free. Free, so free. So the government is there to protect you and me. The objective is to liberate the citizens from colonial bondage, them regulation, them taxation. Rob Jamaica, we independent. Be stronger, together we can make it right. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I. We're gonna be stronger together, come we all just unify. Our purpose is a better Jamaica for you and I.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another edition of UIC Liberty TV. My name is Joseph Patterson, and today we have a very important topic to discuss. Tonight we're going to be talking about foxes guarding the hen house, and we're going to look at the concept of having a fraud, solving a fraud. As you know, the last 3 weeks we have been going through some revelations about issues at one of Jamaica's investment firms. And we have a number of commentators, vloggers, television news, trying to explain to us or trying to share with us in a blow-by-blow description what is happening, who the players are, who did what when, what information was revealed at what time, who is trying to do what, who has confirmation of what, and all manner of shenanigans going on within our government, within the Financial Services Commission, within the BOJ getting involved, and a number of key individuals that dates way back in time to today. So my job today is really for us to step back a bit and take another look at what's really happening with this financial crisis. So good night, Sophia Bell. Good to see you on. Good night, for the truth. Good night, Anthony Williams, Baba Blue, JMH. Good to see you all. I have two very special guests in the studio that's going to be joining me tonight. Two young ladies that you have seen before. They have some very pertinent information they want to share with us, and I think is very important for us to learn from. One of the challenges we face as a people is we don't read a lot sometimes, and we don't study history. So we don't remember what happened before, so we can make connections between the past and the present in order to make good decisions. So tonight I'm hoping to connect some of the dots for us and to have us, kind of appreciate what's going on. Where do we begin? How do we begin? I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of a commentary. And I'll begin this way. History tells us that we should not have trusted the government of Jamaica, particularly the two parties that have governed us for a while. We should not have trusted them with our economy based on history. We should not have trusted them with our banking system, nor should we have trusted them with the FINSAC Commission of Inquiry report. Nevertheless, we did trust them. And today we should similarly conclude that we cannot trust the Bank of Jamaica. Why? Because it's no longer the Bank of Jamaica. It's not owned or operated by the people of Jamaica for the benefit of all Jamaicans. In case you're not aware, the Bank of Jamaica was ceded to private bankers, a part of the Banking International Cartel, and it's now independent of the government of Jamaica, even though they do interact quite a lot in a subservient way, where the government is really a proxy for the Bank of Jamaica instead of the other way around. You can learn more about that on my video on the sellout of the Bank of Jamaica. Now, the Financial Services Commission is but an arm of the government of Jamaica. And like the Financial Investigation Division, it is also probably not to be trusted based on the fact that we have a serious trust issue with the government. And these are really just arms of the government. So they're a reflection of the government. Now, this fact that we cannot trust the government of Jamaica has been confirmed by the government of Jamaica, which has sought the help of the FBI. Yes, it has sought the help of an agency of the United States government to get to the bottom of the SSL multi-billion-dollar fraud. Now, you might think it's a good thing. Yeah, man, bring in the FBI because, obviously we have some problems. But that is telling you something. It is saying that the government of Jamaica, which is supposed to be the authoritative figure that we rely on to manage our affairs, to ensure we have a solid justice system, to ensure that we have the capacity to investigate crime and bring criminals to justice, is telling us by admission that it is not able to manage this situation. Now, if you look at the facts of the SSL situation, the facts of the situation is that SSL has engaged in practices that resulted in fraudulent activities. But not only the SSL, but the FSC has failed to be able to manage the affairs of the country from a regulatory standpoint. The Prime Minister also, by his own action, suggested that he could not respond immediately, so there was a delay. And the Minister of Finance, if you listen to him speaking, especially in the early days, it was quite childish in his response on many occasions. It is clear that the whole governance model of Jamaica is little more than a dolly house or a soap opera of magnificent spectacle if you watch what's happening. I don't know about you, but if I were to be a potential investor standing by and trying to assess Jamaica as a place for me to invest money, I would say a little fraud situation like that them can't manage. And how can the Financial Services Commission be so inept and incompetent in allowing this for 13 years? And my God, the Prime Minister needed such a long time before he could respond. And the Finance Minister just sounded like a kid, dealing with something so sensitive, but being quite childish in his approach many times, if you watch what's happening. There's no doubt that the SSL Board of Directors, the management, the compliance staff, the internal audit department, the external auditors, all have failed to ensure effective internal controls or checks and balances to protect the interest of their clients. There's no doubt that they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The board and management of SSL have displayed the same level, however, of negligence and incompetence that we have seen in the government of Jamaica. It's like they're a mirror image of the incompetences. Now, their actions or failure to act appropriately and failure to have proper checks and balances have resulted in the loss of billions of investor dollars over a 10 to 13 year period. In the case of the government of Jamaica, though, almost all 2.9 million Jamaicans at home and abroad have been robbed or defrauded over a total of 79 years. What happened at SSL is symptomatic of a culture of fraud that has been curated or developed by our political leaders over nearly 8 decades. In fact, this culture of corruption may very well have aided and abetted the fraudulent activities at SSL in much the same way it encouraged fraud across the various ministries and agencies of government. If we step back for a moment and take the time to understand the massive fraud perpetrated on the people of Jamaica by its government in the 1990s, we would be 1,000 times more outraged than we are now about the $4 billion lost to Usain Bolt and 39 other investors at SSL. The 1990s banking meltdown was caused by the government of Jamaica defrauding the people of Jamaica when it paid off a cheap IMF loan in order to engage in reckless borrowing and spending at much higher interest rate, which resulted in having to raise interest rates significantly to attract more loans for deficit spending. You might recall Amar Davis' run with it idea. Not only did this push up the national debt exponentially and put a strain on our exchange rate, it also meant that it was more profitable to lend money to the government than to lend money to people who were engaged in productive enterprise, our small and medium enterprise entrepreneurs. It therefore became impossible for small and medium enterprise entrepreneurs to access or renew loans because of the high interest rate regime created by the then government, thus the rise in default and bankruptcies that followed. The FINSAC solution brought in by the government of Jamaica did not solve the problem, however. It was simply used as a tool to transfer billions of dollars in wealth from our productive entrepreneurs to foreigners and other individuals by selling their debts for pennies on the dollar and foreclosing on the collateralized assets of the victims of a evil high interest rate policy that was brought into effect by the government against its own people. This banking crisis and the FINSAC debacle that ensued was created and perpetrated by the government of Jamaica against the people of Jamaica. It represented 33% of our then economy. Yep. This means that the monies stolen from Usain Bolt and other investors at SSL is small and puny compared to the magnitude of the banking crisis and FINSAC debacle that ensued. Yet, we are not outraged. You don't hear a massive outrage and cry from the Jamaican people. Why? Why are we not equally or more outraged about FINSAC? Because for nearly 3 decades, the two colonial parties have hidden the truth from the people of Jamaica. Both parties have promised to give us the full report of the Commission of Inquiry into FINSAC, and both parties have failed year after year to do the very basic thing of releasing the full report of the Commission so that we, the Jamaican people, can learn, know, and understand what happened and how it impacted us. Meanwhile, obvious victims are aging and dying. The younger people, the not so obvious victims, have no idea what this is all about. And they're primed to vote for more of the same or to just check out of the system altogether, not realizing that the hardship they now suffer are related to the failings of these two parties over many years, including those critical years of FINSAC. In a few more years, the last remaining set of entrepreneurs who were FINSAC'd will pass away, and with them, the history of the greatest fraud in the history of so-called independent Jamaica. The young people today will probably remember SSL and Bolt's stolen money, but will have no idea how the jail PNP stole their future and robbed them of 44,000 job opportunities and chances of a decent life right here in their own country. You know, the worst part of it is that their parents, the journalists, the teachers, remained ignorant on the subject and failed to tell the story and failed to pressure the government to come clean on how FINSAC was used to defraud not 40 investors at SSL, but some 44,000 entrepreneurs who were innovators and job creators. Amazing. If you think about it, we really shouldn't need the FBI to investigate a simple case of fraud where one investment firm failed to ensure effective controls. So it's clear to me, from what has been published so far, it's clear that one or more persons were allowed to operate without some basic things. One, proper separation of duties. Having different people do different things to make sure that it's hard for persons to defraud the organization without colluding. Two, they fail to have proper levels of authorization and enforcing that, meaning you need multiple persons to sign off on key transactions before they go through. Three, they fail to use official company email. That's very simple. Four, they fail to have separate transaction verification phone calls. You're doing a big trade, somebody calls from the compliance department to verify that you have initiated that trade on your account. Five, they fail to have an automated or separate statement issuing department. So you get an automated statement, not from, some so-called account manager or wealth manager or wealth advisor sending out a statement, but rather a different department or the system automatically checking and then sending it out so you can say, oh, what's going on? Six, they fail to have automatic account deposit and withdrawal notification. So just a simple text coming to your phone saying, hey, Usain Bolt, we just draw down $8 million out of your account. Or seven, a compliance officer checking for anomalies, regularly. And if you can look at patterns and trades and see if something looks out of order, like very frequent transactions within a given month, high numbers for one particular investor, and so on. Eight, they fail to have a competent internal audit team and an effective management oversight. Now, these are basics. In any company, especially a financial company, an investment company, you'd want to have a very strong internal audit team and obviously effective management giving oversight to all of this. Now, there's no way that they could have an effective internal audit team and effective management oversight and this kind of thing happen. Number nine, you would expect that this could only happen if you don't have a competent external auditor that would be guided by FSC findings. So any real external auditor would look at FSC's directives or findings, and because of those, they'll kind of rate the audit at a higher degree of risk and would therefore go in with a finer tooth comb, if you will, and dig into the audit, not relying on samples, but doing a full-scale review of the books. And then 10, they could only get away with this if you have a government regulatory agency that would not put the public interest first and fail to carry out its mandate over a 10 to 13-year period of allowing an investment firm to not comply with key regulatory requirements. The real issue then is not SSL. It's obvious that it had some serious failures, right? And the need for those who committed the fraud to pay the ultimate price, that's obvious too. The real issue is that we cannot trust the government of Jamaica, and that the government of Jamaica cannot even trust itself with such a simple case of fraud. I know you've been led by the media and everybody to be, this is an explosive thing. It's only explosive because it's Usain Bolt's name. The other people, there are many people being defrauded every day in Jamaica, losing money in various banks and institutions, but you don't hear much about it. It's a case, yes, but there's no massive outrage. What I want you to do tonight is to become more in tune with the real problem that we're faced with. Why is there no massive outrage for the bigger issues that are really damaging our country? The answer is simple. The government of Jamaica itself is a fraud and the facilitator of fraud, and we cannot trust a fraud to investigate or report on fraud. We have been asking the FOXES to guard the hen house for over 79 years now, and they're eating the eggs and they're killing the chickens. One of the FOXES have changed the line from a few time now to time come, meaning that the time has come for us to change the guards, yeah, and give another fox a chance to oversee the hen house. But we know all too well what that's going to lead to. In fact, those who are clamoring now that time has come, they have had 18 and a half years straight in office. Yeah. And that period ended with a massive failure, including the meltdown of the 1990s and the use of FINSAC to defraud 44,000 investors of their properties. Since then, the other fox has had more than 3 terms guarding the hen house, after getting 2 terms in 1944 and 2 terms in 1962, just before independence and just before, after we got the right to vote. So we kind of have an equilibrium now. The 2 foxes have just about equal amount of time guarding the hen house. And what we can see from all of this is that the longer they guard the house, the more eggs they'll eat and the more chicken they'll kill. Because they were guarding the hen house, we lost GOS, that's our public transportation system, which was cleaner, safer, and more orderly. We lost our, Air Jamaica airline, after losing multiple millions of dollars due to corruption. We lost our 2 major airports in Kingston and Montego Bay, owned by foreign companies today. We lost our train service. We lost our agricultural sector, banana, coffee, sugar. We lost the safety of our communities with their importation of guns, establishment of gangs, and proliferation of garrisons. We lost our dollar to constant devaluation and bad debts because of deficit spending. We lost our sense of purpose and direction, with their so-called free education, whatever expensive education we've had. We lost our healthcare system, especially in the 1990s when they introduced a bunch of fast food ideas. That's another story, actually. We lost out on having good roads, sidewalks, and street lights and fixed addresses because the money was going elsewhere. We lost our soul. We lost our culture as a people after trusting them with our country for 79 years. They even tried to sell our bodies to the highest bidder just the other day during that so-called pandemic. The government of Jamaica is now so confused and confusing and overbearing to the point where it now issues impractical edicts to pay traffic tickets without a proper system in place for the same. They pass ridiculous laws such as mandating child seat in public passenger vehicles, seriously, while exempting some. Can you see clearly now, my friends? The more we allow them, the more we shall be enslaved by them. I actually believe time come. But for what? Time come for us to tell them that time up. We can no longer afford to continue to have these 2 parties in charge of our lives. And so tonight, it's my pleasure to welcome my 2 guests as we dig in to this issue of FINSAC and the link with SSL. It's my pleasure to welcome Yola and welcome Miss Dixon of FINSAC. How are you ladies doing tonight? SSL.
I'm quite fine. I'm good.
Okay.
But Joseph, I'm getting an echo.
How are you ladies doing tonight? Yes, turn off somebody's playing it in the back. Turn it off. Somebody's playing.
Joseph, I'm getting an echo.
Yes, let me do it this way. One of you have the program playing in your background somewhere. So turn off the program if you have it playing, and then you won't have any feedback. Let me try Miss Dixon. Miss Dixon, can you hear me? Okay, you're muted, Miss Dixon. So unmute yourself.
I'm muted.
I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Could you bring yourself more in the middle so we can see it? Yeah, there we go. A little bit back to the end, the other end slightly. They're perfect. That's it. Now let me bring on Miss Yola. Miss Yola, say something. Now you're muted, Miss Yola. You're muted.
Okay.
Unmute yourself.
I'm hearing you now.
Right. So it's your problem, Miss Yola. You have something playing in the background.
No, nothing at all. I have nothing playing. I'm hearing you
Okay.
now. But I'm hearing even when
You see, when I take off Miss Yola, there's no feedback. So I know it's on her end. Something is going on there. I'm going to ask Naika to work with you in the background, Miss Yola. Naika, give her some help for me so we can get rid of that background noise. All right. So before, wonderful. So Naika will work with that. So Mrs. Dixon, so nice to have you
Yes,
on
sir.
tonight. You
So
listened
nice
to
being
my
here as well.
you listened to my little diatribe a while ago. Do you have any comment on what you have heard? Anything that stood out for you before we go any further?
No, you're right on target, but I, as a historian, I like to start at the beginning. There
Mm-hmm.
is a genesis for everything that happens.
Yeah.
So tonight, I would like the whole world to know exactly what caused the Jamaica financial meltdown, the likes of which we have never seen in the history of Jamaica. And it all started with what you're talking about there when we sold off, or the government of the day divested. That is the word I'm going to be using tonight. Instead of saying that we sold off all those things, Mr. Patterson, we're going to say that a lot of our national treasures,
Mm-hmm.
our industries were sold off mainly to foreigners because of dictates that were given to the government to what they call rationalize the economy,
Mm-hmm.
which really, to my mind, was just setting the stage for what has become known as FINSAC and SSL. But I want to read something that the late Eagle Merchant Group owner, Paul Chen Young, said. And I don't think a lot of persons in Jamaica know this fact. But this is what caused the debacle.
Mm-hmm.
Having not gotten enough money from the sale of our hotels, Dr. Omar Davis has omitted from his analysis the important fact that the government, it was his government, that encouraged domestic banks and life insurance companies to invest in and to develop the tourism sector, without which involvement the present tourism infrastructure would not exist in its present form. There would have been no successful hotel divestment, which really was a failure, until the domestic financial institutions decided to make investments in the industry. Let's
Mm-hmm.
pause there for a moment.
Yes.
So Omar Davis invited Don Crawford, who owned Central National Bank, and a slew of indigenous, meaning local banks and insurance companies, to leave their core business of banking and go into the investment of infrastructure to build new hotels or to refurbish hotels. And that was what caused Don Crawford to outbid on a block of foreign exchange by the tune of about $2. And that was an embarrassment to the then government.
Mm-hmm.
So he is looking for foreign exchange because he is working on the Grand Renaissance. Let me get that name properly. He is working on two grand hotels to fuse them together into one big conference center. Right here it is. Don Crawford received effusive praise publicly from the Minister of Finance, Omar Davis, for his expansion program. He was acclaimed nationally for his bold step in purchasing and linking two large adjoining hotels on Turtle Beach, Ocherius, to develop the single largest convention hotel, the Jamaica Grand Renaissance, with 720 rooms.
So stick a pin there, Ms. Dixon. I want to understand something clearly. So I know you're trying to explain a particular set of transactions. So the government has directed people to move from what they're
Not just
currently
any
doing.
people,
Sorry?
the banking sector
Right, the
and
banking
the
sector.
insurance sector,
Right. So the
to
government.
leave their core functions and go and help develop the now booming tourism industry.
Right. So the
And
government is interfering with the market, right? They're telling the
precisely,
market how the market should behave. Now, but Miss Dixon, I want to find out something very important. In the 1990s, PJ Patterson told all of Jamaica that he is going to take us out of the IMF. Am I correct?
yes, you're correct.
And he made a big fanfare about it, a big fuss about it, and said, wonderful, we're going to do this thing. Now, when he took us out of the IMF in the 1990s, that meant we're moving from cheap loans, because the IMF loan was at very low interest rate at the time. So we're moving from
Yes,
very,
but
very
remember
cheap.
that IMF, to get their loans, you
Yeah,
have
man.
to restructure,
They come with
and they
restrictions.
dictate to you.
They come with restrictions. They come with
That's
restrictions.
right.
So for
And
example,
those restrictions usually hurt the local population
just
more
like it's
than the
hurting us
people
now. So
who
hold
are
on.
going to be.
But
Yeah.
follow me carefully, because there's a catch-22, because the current, and I hope you all can come in.
Let you
soon.
listen.
The current, oh, it's still a problem. The current Minister of Finance recently announced a big amount of new debt that he has arranged with the IMF, two sets of debt. One, which is to roll over existing debt, where we get a moratorium of 10 years where we don't pay any principal, we only pay interest, and it's a relatively low interest rate that we're going to have for a 20-year period. And another debt now, which is a kind of a line of credit that we can draw on in case there are certain movements in the global economy, which are adversarial to Jamaica. That's the argument he has posited for us. Now, PJ Patterson back in the 90s said to us, we're going to get rid of the IMF, and we all cheered. And so he gave up the low interest rate loans with restrictions that were on those loans, whatever restrictions there are. And he took on now a different approach. And the approach now is this: he's going to borrow from the private market at interest. Now, when you're borrowing from the private market, it means that you're now open to whatever interest rate variations there are, and how Jamaica's debt is classified, whether it's, A grade or B grade or C grade and so on. Jamaica then found itself in a position where the government, that is, to get money to spend, it has to make borrowing from lending to the government more attractive than lending elsewhere. So now monies which should have gone into lending to productive sectors were now coming to the government instead. People, I remember when I was a boy, when I was young, not boy, I mean, I finished college, everybody was buying government paper. Do you remember that?
Yes, but I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit there, Joseph. And
Yeah.
I want us to step back and pretend that you are living in rural Jamaica and you really don't understand all of this that is going on. So I want to bring it down to a level that most people should be able to understand. So remember, I said that it was a government that caused the banking sector to be in the tourism sector, to refurbish it and whatever. And that Don Crawford is actually working on two large hotels, fusing them as one. So he is in need of foreign exchange.
Yes.
He goes to buy foreign exchange, and foreign exchange is at an auction. And in an auction, the prize or whatever it is goes to the person who outbids everybody else.
Right.
So all the people who want foreign exchange will not get as much because the bulk will go to Don Crawford. This incensed the then PNP government. It embarrassed them because it proved that the rate of exchange was not as the government said it was. It was actually higher. So you are now devaluing the Jamaican dollar in order to get $1 US. You have to find more Jamaican dollar each time to buy one US dollar.
So the government was trying to manipulate the exchange rate.
That's right. But
So
at
they
the
wanted-
same time that they are chiding or chastising Don Crawford for doing this, they are doing the same thing. And I would like to tell the whole world what happened when the government stepped into what was called the black market.
So let me stick a pin. I want to fast forward that. So basically, Ms. Dixon, what you're going to tell us is that the government was engaged in black market foreign exchange buying and selling. So outside of the regular system. So they put up a front and say, here's the regular system that we all should be in. There's an auction system where you come and bid for foreign exchange. And if those who bid the highest amount get it. But in the meantime, they were now sending people with monies in the backs of vehicles to go do black market transaction. So that
in other words, they put millions of dollars into what they call their street agents.
Yes.
They are not officially employed to the Bank of Jamaica,
Right.
but they're on the streets buying up the US dollars from anybody who has remittance coming to them or wherever.
The government was engaged in a criminal activity.
That's right.
The very government.
The very government. So it's not today.
No, exactly. It's not today. Yeah. But
I just want the whole world to understand this little part here, and I'm going to read it. Shortage of foreign exchange, it's not long. To keep up the pace of development of the hotel led Central National to outbid other financial institutions en bloc for foreign exchange. These funds were one of the many instances in which that embassy auctioned the foreign exchange received. But in so doing, CNB, Central National Bank, bid exceeded the unofficially proclaimed official. In other words, it's a lot of manipulation going on here, where out of one side of the mouth, it's an unofficial rate, and then out of the other side of the mouth, it's an official rate. So he beat them in the bidding at the official exchange rate of 22 to 1 US dollar. So Don Crawford, instead of bidding $22, he bid $25.10.
Okay. And the end result of that is
end result of that is this was embarrassing to the government because it signaled a meaningful depreciation of the rate of exchange. Although it was well known that the BOJ was paying more for foreign currency bought by their street agents.
Okay.
These agents were authorized non-employees of the BOJ who were financed with millions of dollars of BOJ cash in the trunks of their cars to buy dollars on the street, a project which came to an expected, infamous, and abrupt end with one of the street buyers being robbed of millions of Jamaican dollars.
So
it's not me, sir.
So that's in your book. Is that in your book? Is that in your book here?
Yes, it's in my book.
That book. Okay. So people can get this book
on
to learn
page
more about
210.
But I want to move us along now, Miss Dixon, because I want to bring Miss Baker in.
I know, but I just want to show them that it was this embarrassment with the sale of the dollars being revealed that the very same finance ministry was covertly dispatching agents and they got robbed. Hear this. With blood rushing to its head, when this action was revealed, an embarrassed PNP government set about withdrawing public funds from the Central National Bank, making it publicly known what they were doing. And in the process, it started or triggered a run on the bank, which was seemingly designed to end the life of Central National Bank.
So in summary, what you're saying is the government decided to be vindictive.
That's right.
And they decided that they're going to destroy Don Crawford and his bank because he dared
of this embarrassment.
to step out of line. He never stay in line and do what they want. So the government decided to crush him. Now, when they create this run on, what's the name of the bank? What was the bank called? What was it called? This
Central National Bank.
Central National. When they created a run on Central National by pulling out their money out of the bank and making it
not just their money, public funds like NHT.
When I say their money, I mean the money the government have control over.
Right.
So they had control over all, just like how in SSL, there is some government money. There's some government money.
Another parallel where public funds are withdrawn from a bank and the public seeing what is happening panics.
Right.
And in fear, everybody now has a run on the local banks, not the foreign banks.
Good. So that's what I wanted to bring up.
Local banks.
So this action of the government.
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that there is no way these local banks can operate without cash. So when people draw out their monies from the bank, it causes them to become what we call insolvent, meaning they have no cash to lend to people who want money to do their business, whatever. And at the same time, we say they are not liquid. When you don't have this, you're not liquid. So you see the situation now with the local indigenous banking system.
So one of your
action of spite and bad mind is why we're here today, sitting in these chairs.
So I follow your point, and just to summarize it, the essence of what you're saying is the government of Jamaica engaged in illegal activities. The government of Jamaica decided to be vindictive against one particular banker, Don Crawford, who went against their narrative. And as a result of that, they sought to make his bank insolvent. But then there was a ripple effect now throughout the entire local banking sector.
And throughout the whole economy, the whole society.
Well, the banking sector affects the entire economy. So once you have your local banks now becoming illiquid, because
insolvent and with no liquidity or no cash.
Yeah, because of that, now you now have a case where many banks found themselves in a difficult position because deposit holders were withdrawing their funds out of fear from these banks. So you have a run on the bank happening. You also noted that the international banks, like the Scotia banks and the CIBC First Caribbean banks, would have been immune somewhat because people had greater confidence in those banks and so on.
The foreign banks did not feel the impact of this domino effect. It was really the indigenous or the local banks that collapsed.
Understood. So I want to bring Miss Baker in now. But Miss Baker, so I heard what Miss Dixon said, and she's focusing more on the foreign exchange situation, the Don Crawford interaction with the government and so on. I have identified another side to the story, which is based on the government's interest rate policy That's a direct result of its
Yep.
monetary policy. That's a direct result of politicking without considering the consequences to the Jamaican people. And particularly because I know this, I've studied PJ Patterson carefully. PJ Patterson wanted to have the freedom to spend money the way he wanted to do it, as opposed to being held to any checks and balances by, love them or hate them, the IMF put some restrictions on us that would have prevented us from borrowing our way into the moon. And I'm not a supporter of the IMF, but the fact of the matter is he left the IMF so that he would have the freedom to borrow unlimitedly and spend without controls. What are your thoughts on all of that, Ms. Baker?
Well, some of what Valerie said about Central National Bank, in talking to Don Crawford years ago, I understand that the government really, there are persons within the government who wanted to take a portion of Central National. And Don Crawford stood up and says, no, it ain't going to happen.
You mean
Because they
shares? They
called,
wanted shares? They wanted shares in the bank? Okay.
yeah. They called him to a meeting at Jamaica House one Saturday night, late in the night. And on his way home, when he denied everything they wanted, on his way home, he decided to pick up the newspaper to see the headlines reading portions of Don Crawford's bank is now taken over by government, which nothing went back like that, because he would not condone or accept what they were giving him.
Right.
And if he could not get funds in Jamaica, he said he had entities overseas who could give him all the funds he wanted. So he didn't want any partnership from any Jamaican.
So as usual, and I know this from personal experience as well, that every business in Jamaica, the more you want to do business in Jamaica, is the more politicians want a piece of that. They want
a piece of that.
part of the action. They want you to either bribe them or they must make a money in the process. So if you come back from
Or
abroad,
they stand for you and sabotage you.
absolutely, they'll wipe you out. If you're not willing to play ball, they'll wipe you out. That's the kind of Jamaica we're in. Now, I want to ask both of you this question, beginning with you, Ms. Baker. If you were to summarize for us, what caused the banking system to fail in the 1990s? In just one sentence, how would you summarize what caused the failure in the 1990s? Did I say 70s? In the 1990s.
1990s, yeah.
What caused the failure? In summary, just one sentence. I'll go with you first, Ms. Baker, and then Ms. Dixon.
The decision of the then Minister of Finance to hike interest rates on loans. Interest rates that started out at 18, 20%. In going through my documents to prepare for this, I found persons whose interest rates went up to as much as 173%. There was one lady who borrowed $25,000 to start a business. Eventually, she couldn't start it because of deaths in her family. And she started paying back the loan even though she didn't start the company. However, they sold her property to Jamaica Redevelopment, and when Jamaica Redevelopment called her to come and settle, they had interest and penalty charges of over $11 million on a $25,000 loan.
Wow! And this is I've read many of the stories. I've watched a lot of the commission, persons from the commission who have given statements, and I've seen this straight throughout the process. Ms. Dixon, how do you summarize the main cause of the banking system failure in the 1990s?
Bad mind and wickedness, plus the fact that when the banks were left with no money due to the run on the bank, the same government invited cash-rich citizens, either with old money or nefarious means of money, to buy government papers to take advantage of the high interest rates, the guaranteed high interest rates.
So in other words, Ms. Dixon, and this is a point that I want our viewers to fully understand. when the government decides to intervene in any aspect of the economy, it can either help or hinder that part of the economy. When the government decided that it was going to become a major borrower in the private market, it incentivized lenders to move monies away from the productive sector and to move that money to the government. If you can get, let's say, 20% from government, risk-free, or invest with a productive person and get the same 20% but with significant risk, because once you're doing private enterprise, there's risk. Where will you put that money? Most persons would logically put it with the government. I remember all my friends from college, everybody wanted to buy government paper. They are foreign, they want to buy government paper because the government of Jamaica was paying high interest. This automatically pushes up the interest rates at banks. Automatically, because the bank has to decide where to place your risk and where to place your bet. Now, if you couple that with what Ms. Dixon spoke about earlier on, with the government taking actions to cause a run on the bank, couple a run on the bank with a high interest rate policy, that's a recipe for disaster. In the mix of all of this, though, there are winners and there are losers. And those who are controlling the strings are controlling it to win, and those who are holding the blade will lose. Miss Dixon, Miss Baker, and many other entrepreneurs in Jamaica were holding the blade, while Omar Davis and PJ Patterson and the People's National Party was holding the handle, and we suffered dearly because of that. Now,
And
this
you
is
know,
not,
Mr. Patterson, one of the things I would like, in hindsight now,
yeah,
I have a feeling that there were ulterior motives back then. And the
absolutely.
ulterior motives, I'm sure that any well-thinking individual, and you don't have to be an economist to figure this out, that in raising interest rates to a level, I
Yeah,
mean, even if you're dealing in drugs, there's no way you could meet those.
yes,
So
yes,
there's got to be an ulterior motive
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
they had in mind,
Well,
that these
the motive, Miss Baker, I can tell you what the motive was. I've studied this so closely from a boy coming up because I was very interested in this. The motive behind all of the problem that you have described was summed up nicely by Reverend Thwaites. It was to orchestrate a transfer of
fear
wealth
of wealth.
from some to some. And our goodly leaders figured out the best way to
Yes, right.
transfer wealth from
The
the
poor to the
large,
rich.
And I tell you something, one
yeah,
of the individuals involved in this SSL now was one of the individuals back then heading one of the banks that called a particular individual from a company to have a meeting with him at his office. And when he went to the office to meet this gentleman, he told him, he just asked him, how is business going? Is everything going okay? Poor guy didn't understand what was going on and said, sure. And he's leaving, he's saying, he didn't have to call me to a meeting at his office to ask me this. When he went back to his office, guess what? The chains were on his doors, and that was
yeah. So this
thermoplastic.
is how they transferred wealth, Mrs.
Yes,
Baker. This is how they
yes,
transfer wealth, Mrs. Dixon. It was to take from some and concentrate in the hands of a few, and they did it meticulously. It was
right.
well done. You could
Well
not,
orchestrated.
that fraud makes SSL look like nothing.
Yes.
Exactly.
You're
Because the
talking about,
difference between SSL and
yes,
FINSAC is,
yes.
with SSL now, they just go in and take out the people money.
Yeah, it's a
Just take the
straight
raw
teaching.
cash.
SSL
In
is a,
FinSac,
yeah.
what they did,
Mhm,
including bank managers,
mhm,
they took people's titles. If
yeah.
you go to the bank to get a mortgage for a house,
Mhm,
it is understood that you're going to have 25, 30 years to pay your mortgage, right?
yeah,
To pay it
yeah.
off. They knew this. And the moment you walk away from the bank, leaving your title there, they would use your title to take out loans for themselves.
Mhm, mhm.
This
Yes. Which
woman that borrowed
encumbers, yeah.
$25,000 had ended up with $11 million in charges.
let's break this down for our viewers. What you're saying, Miss Baker, is that a person goes in and takes a mortgage, 25, 30 years. Let's say the mortgage back then, it was a 2 million, 3 million mortgage, for example, for a house. Even though it was lower than that. The numbers are higher now. While they have your title as collateral for this loan, somebody in the bank uses your title as collateral to take out another loan, right? That's what you're saying.
Or two, three.
Or three. Now, this is massive fraud. Now, how come we never call in the FBI to come investigate?
Exactly. Because the people, they know the FBI would have figured out what the heck they were doing.
How can we
all end up in jail?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how we're calling FBI for a $4 billion problem compared to trillions. Listen, the FINSAC situation impacted our economy to the tune of 33.33% of our GDP.
And GDP, we must explain, is the amount of goods and services produced
by
in
the
a country, in the entire country, in a particular time frame, whether it's 3 months or a year or what have you.
So this is a year. Go ahead.
Sorry. Go on.
No, you go.
I just want to emphasize on what Yola is saying here, how evil and wicked FinSAC really was when compared to SSL. And as she rightly said, and you rightly said, Joseph, there was no outrage 25 years ago when the productive and the manufacturing sectors of Jamaica, they were decimated, totally wiped out by the greed.
I don't think people understand, Ms. Dixon.
I don't think so either.
I don't think, and that's why I call you, both of you, back here, because I don't think, when I saw the outrage for SSL, I said, something wrong with the minds of my people, because they're right to be outraged. But where is that outrage for this massive fraud called FinSAC, which has continued, by the way? You're talking about 20 years since 22 years now since the whole thing has happened. 30 years combined if you put all of it together.
And can you imagine, within that time, these people have deliberately placed the FinSAC report under literal lock.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Well, it's not under lock and key. From my understanding, not even the first page has been written.
Exactly.
So there is no report.
There is no report. They spend over $100 million to pay to get a report. This is taxpayers' money.
And the taxpayers sit back
pay taxes,
and accept this. But because it is Usain Bolt, everybody is jumping and frothing at the mouth. And listen, David, Joseph, can I just read a little part here of what Jamaica was like before the PJ Patterson-led administration and Finance Minister Omar Davis put their greedy hands on the Jamaican economy. And we are suffering today as a result. People do not even understand to connect the dots that the high crime rate we're having is a direct result of 25 years ago. Hear this. In the midst of the most fertile and dynamic world economy in a century, a devastating plague of debt struck Jamaica and no other place on earth. The deadly virus spread through the Jamaican economy like an epidemic. Factories collapsed like bodies before the Black Plague. And with all of that, the Jamaican government of the day still insisted that they were going to liberalize the economy and bring in foreigners Ta-da-da-da-da-da. Here
Yeah,
comes the
I,
Chinese.
so hold on, Miss Dixon, because I know my listeners very well, you see, and I want to make sure we keep them fully in tune with what we're talking about here. So we use words like liberalized and so on. The bottom line is we end up with a government that was now playing with the economy of Jamaica, not enabling and facilitating and empowering our local indigenous entrepreneurs, but
No.
one that was now playing games. And the real purpose of these games, is to bring more monies into the hands of the politicians. That is all it is. It's how can we
And
get our hands on
and
more
that
money.
is why
Yeah.
we hear the word liberalization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because liberalization means to free up the economy,
But
take
yeah.
away all restrictions, and tell
But
East, West, North, and South that there is a fat cow worth milking, and it's called Jamaica.
yeah. But
So
remember,
they come here
Mhm.
and they want everything for the hotels that were divested to them, mainly foreigners, and they have to have foreign exchange to buy this, buy that.
Hold on, Miss
Nothing.
Dixon. Hold on. I want to keep this simple. You're saying a whole heap of things, and I know your head is full.
I know,
Your head is
but
full.
it is
But
so
I
strong.
want to just tighten it up for people. All these big words they throw, liberalization and so on. The bottom line is this: the incentive of the Jamaican politician. That's the incentive. Whether they are being led by America or Russia or USSR as it was in the day, it doesn't matter. The primary incentive for the politician, how much money can I get into my hands for two purposes. Purpose number one, to enrich myself. And purpose number two, to have enough money to win the next election. Those are the two objectives
That's
of
right.
a politician in Jamaica. Whether it is Andrew or it is Mark, whether it is Patterson or Siaga, whether it is Bruce or Portia, the fundamental thing is, when I leave office, what will be my net worth? And that is why I notice politicians come in and they have one net worth when they come in, and when they come out, it is a very big net worth. So they want as much money in their hands. If that money comes from China, is okay. If it comes from the USA, it's okay. If it comes from ripping off our own people by
It's still
destroying
okay.
the sector
It's still okay.
and destroying the entrepreneurs so we get more money into our hand, that's all that matters to the Jamaican politician. As a matter of fact, globally it's the same thing. But depending on the intellectual level of the citizenry, the game can be played extensively or otherwise. In Jamaica, where the vast majority of us can hardly keep up with this conversation, then they can easily get away with it, because most of it, you start to talk about economics and you start to talk, the gossip, for example, I've been watching the Usain Bolt case, right, and the SSL. People are more engaged in the soap opera side of the situation.
Yeah.
They're not really learning anything. I can tell you this, the SSL saga is very, very simple. At its core, you're talking about fraud committed by persons in an organization that lacked proper internal controls. End of story.
Yeah.
You now go in and you report the case, and an investigator goes in. They investigate. People go to court and people go to prison. End of story. Why is it so big? Why is it so massive? I want to tell you this before we lose some time on the program, Mrs. Dixon and Mrs. Gray Baker. I want to tell you this. This case of SSL is going to be used and has already been used to change Jamaica's financial laws so that all of our financial system will come under the Bank of Jamaica. And why do they want it all under the Bank of Jamaica? Because during COVID, this government, with the full support of the PNP, passed laws that makes the Bank of Jamaica independent of the government of Jamaica and owned by international banking cartels. So the same thing that hit us through the back door with FINSAC, when they were able to transfer wealth to local and overseas parties through the whole crisis. Right now, they're going to use SSL to tighten the regulations in such a way that they squeeze out more Jamaicans out of the financial sector, concentrated in the hands of a few, controlled by the Bank of Jamaica, which is controlled by national cartels, not the Jamaican.
That is true, but we need to pin it down even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
According to Mr. Bonnick, the late Mr. Bonnick, during the late 1980s and early 1990s, there were significant structural changes in the financial sector, and I'd like us to talk about that for a moment. Most noteworthy was the rise in importance of groups comprising several types of financial institutions. And these included that every bank now has a commercial bank, a merchant bank, a building society, life and general insurance, and here it comes, investment companies or investment trusts.
Mm-hmm.
This form of business that you say come under the umbrella of being a group, Eagle Merchant group of companies, was designed to take advantage of opportunities, just as you're saying, Joseph, for minimizing the impact of regulations, supervision, and taxation upon the group. So the less regulatory processes there are, and the less supervision there are, and the less taxation, the more attractive the SSLs become.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And as a result of that, they can take opportunities to do all manner of shenanigans. One of the shenanigans I understand is called arbitrage, where you buy something in one place and at the same time you're selling it in another place.
At
So
a different
you buy
price,
for 10 and you can sell for 100, and the difference between the two things belongs to somebody's pocket.
Absolutely. Now, whenever it is fraudulently done, you have a problem. Sometimes you have, non-fraudulent arbitrage. For example, when Yola goes up to Miami and buy a barrel full of clothes, and she get it at a significant discount because she find the right place, and she come back to Jamaica and just sell it at market price down here, and she make a arbitrage profit. That's okay because she did nothing illegal. Mm-hmm. But when you have government manipulating regulations and regulators to achieve
or not putting those things in place,
then you have issues.
That is where it becomes a problem.
I want to run through some questions I have here now, and ladies, let's keep it short now.
Okay. But the important thing is that we have to lay the foundation, so that people realize that just a small thing leads to all of this.
We're going to come back. This is part 2, and we're going to have a part 3. But follow me on this. How did FINSAC impact those directly affected by the banking crisis in the 1990s? I want you to give me some quick examples of how it impacted some people directly, and then we're going to look at how it impacted us indirectly.
Well, if I may come in here, because this is where our company was directly affected. Mm-hmm. If you have a business plan that you know you're going to service a loan you will borrow at 20%, you set your business plan in a manner that you can service your loan comfortably. Mm-hmm. All your expenses can be taken care of, and you're comfortable. Mm-hmm. What is the problem is when you wake up one morning and the interest rate jumps from 20% to as high as 68%.
Mm-hmm. All right, so to summarize, Ms. Dixon, during the FINSAC era, persons went to bed with one interest rate that they could manage, and wake up the next morning to an interest rate that is impossible to manage. It's
And
impossible.
then you have a minister of finance who goes to the gullible public, because we have to admit facts.
Yes.
We don't read.
Yes.
We don't understand most things. And anything that politicians tell us, we swallow it.
Yes.
So when you have an Omar Davis coming to the public and telling the people that we borrowed money and didn't care to service our loans, and that is the reason why 44,000 Jamaican entrepreneurs failed, and people believe that and don't ask themselves, how is it that companies that are 100 years old suddenly overnight don't know how to run businesses, and as a result are discarded as bad debtors?
In summary, Mrs. Dixon, what you're saying is the government tell a lie on the small and medium enterprise
businesses.
And the lie was this, it's not we that caused them to fail, it's them couldn't manage. And the real reason is that there's no way that anybody, and now let's make it real for people. Let's say you took out a mortgage. You know, every 5 years you have to renew your mortgage. Even though it's a 25-year loan, every 5 year they renew roughly, right? And so you have a mortgage at, let's say, 5%. And the 5-year run off, and you're about now to renew your mortgage. And when you go in and say, the new mortgage rate is going to be 30%. Impossible. There's hardly a human being that is average and basic and like everybody else that can jump from a 5% mortgage rate on their home to now paying a mortgage rate of 30%, because the monthly payment will be much bigger than your earnings. So you can't possibly keep it up. It's the same way when a small business owner takes out a loan that is reasonable and know that he can carry this loan based on the business turnover and profitability. And then tomorrow he gets a new interest rate that no matter how big, if his business was to quadruple, him couldn't service the loan then. And that is what
and not just that, Mr. Patterson, the fact that those business persons and the banks that they were dealing with, the bank don't call you and say, okay, you know, there's an issue here, come in and let us talk. We're not allowed. I have a copy of a letter here. This is written on Myers, Fletcher, and Gordon letterhead. It is written to Mr. Errol Campbell, who was the manager at FINSAC. And it says, Dear Sir, we represent Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation and have been asked to respond on its behalf to yours of November 3, 2008. As our client, which is JRF, is Myers Fletcher client, as our client is the entity that stepped into your shoes as creditor, we are astounded that you feel free to copy them an adverse, in quote, in bracket, an adverse party in the litigation at caption with your correspondence to our client, or even contemplate divulging information to them at all, as any such communication would seem to constitute a breach of your contract with our client. We remind you that under your contract with our client, you have transferred to our client all underline of your rights to give and receive reports in relation to a loan agreement and credit and security reports.
All right.
Furthermore, as the closing date of this agreement, all rights and responsibilities with respect to the servicing and administration of assets passed to our clients.
Ms. Dixon, it's going to be, Ms. Baker, it's very hard because, you know, I know those letters are, you know, hard to, but the essence of it.
What it is that they're telling him that these debtors has no obligation to know what we're doing with their money and their titles and their everything.
Mrs. Baker, can you please tell the whole world where the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation is registered?
It is registered in the state. It is registered in Jamaica, but it was
Yes.
first registered in the state of Texas. It's a
Okay.
collection agency.
Right.
It's a
So what is the
collection
significance?
agency.
What is the hold on? What is the significance of that? Like, tell us what does that mean to us? That it
Okay,
is
well, Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation is not a bank.
right.
Yet the
But
Minister
what
of
is-
Finance, Dr. Davis, changed the Jamaican Money Lending Act
Mhm.
to facilitate Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation charging penalties and interest on loans.
So in other
In
words,
other words, when the titles were given to Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation, they did not give them the accounting that was given to them. Was not that Mr. Patterson borrowed $30 million. He has paid 15 and he only owes 15. They were only given that Mr. Patterson borrowed $30 million. And they now start charging interest and penalties.
all right,
on
let's
$30 million.
unpack
And
this.
that
Let's-
30 million
hold
could
on,
reach
hold on.
54
One
million.
second, 1 second. Let us unpack this, because you see, you ladies, you have this in you like a DNA. The rest of us, the vast majority of Jamaicans, don't get it. So let's back up a second. What was the purpose of the Jamaica? What is it? Say it again. The Jamaica.
Jamaica
Jamaica
Redevelopment Foundation.
Jamaica.
Again, though.
Hold on. 1 second, Miss Dixon. Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation. Listen to the name. Listen to Jamaica.
Yes, and they have no redevelopment in Jamaica.
Foundation. So this foundation is going to redevelop Jamaica. Okay. Now, who were the owners of this foundation?
At
It
first,
was-
it was registered by Dennis Jocelyn out of
Okay.
Texas. It was taken over by Jason Rudd.
Okay, so Jason, no, the first person, what's his name? Dennis Jocelyn?
Dennis Jocelyn.
Dennis Jocelyn, a
Right.
Texan.
Right. An American registered a company called the Jamaica
Jamaica
Redevelopment Foundation.
Foundation. And why did he register this company? What was the purpose of it?
The purpose was, well, I guess with meetings with the finance minister and the politicians back then, was listen, we have a bunch of properties here that we need you to pay us for it. A bunch of properties and assets valued at $323 million US.
Right.
being
That
sold to this
represents-
man
One
for
second.
$23 million.
Right.
That
Hold on.
represents the so-called bad debtors
Yeah,
collateral.
man. We're coming to it,
So,
Miss Dixon.
the
Hold
Jamaican
on,
government-
hold on, Miss Dixon, hold on. So the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation, registered by an American, a white man, in order to buy the debts to buy the so-called bad debts of Jamaicans.
Right.
Yes,
well, I
of
guess the
course,
reason
yes.
why
Follow
he
me,
called
follow
it
me.
Redevelopment Foundation was the intent. They wanted to give the intent that he's a collection agency. So now these debts are going to be given to him for him to be collecting on it.
Right, I understand that. What I'm saying is, let's take it one step at a time. So the name that is chosen is a facade.
Right.
The name
Criminal.
Sorry?
Criminal.
Yeah.
Because
so-
you cannot be fooling the Jamaican people.
Hold on. We know them fool we already, but I want us to make the fooling
What's
clear
a
to all of
blatant
us.
and no outrage?
I want us to all understand how they fool we. So our government was in collusion with a foreign person, a foreign power, a foreign individual to create a facade, to create a misrepresentation by calling it the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation to sound nice to it.
Yes.
This
But
foreign,
it gets worse than that,
waste,
Joseph.
man. Hold on, Mr.
Me know.
Hold on. So now that they create this fake thing, the goal is this collection agency, which that wouldn't sound good on paper to say the Jamaica, the Texas collection agency.
Agency.
So this collection agency now is arranging to buy off some debts, because they're going to say that these are bad debts now. And the government going to take over these bad debts and sell these bad debts to this company for pennies on the dollar. Am I right so far?
Right. Correct.
Later on now, based on the laws of Jamaica, they decide, let's register this company in Jamaica because it was getting complicated with it being a foreign company. So they take the same name, the Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation, and they register it here in Jamaica.
That's correct.
And then proceeded now to conclude the transaction of selling off your properties to this body for a little bit of
Well,
money.
yeah, but selling off some of the properties.
Okay, good.
But if I could just
Because remember that the government, there are government people who took over some of these properties.
Right, right.
Took
So
them
in
for
the mix
themselves.
of all of this, some property gone to Jamaica Redevelopment Fund, some gone to certain politicians who get to buy it for little and nothing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And some politicians who would have been on the bad end of the stick get away with murder because they were, a part of their debt was written off.
That's
and then
right.
they get off the hook. So they didn't lose anything.
They didn't
So in
lose
the grand
anything.
scheme of things, Miss Dixon, in the grand scheme of things, all this accomplished was to make sure you take away the property from those persons who were made into bad debtors by virtue of the government's bad policies.
But
That's right.
it gets even worse than that, which is
Yeah.
why we're saying that the SSL is nothing.
Yes.
These portfolios that were taken over were actually sold to a thing called Beale Bank from
Okay.
Texas.
Yeah, it was
And
same
it was
Dennis
the Beale
Jocelyn.
Bank. I couldn't leave here this evening and not let us understand this. It is this Texas Beale Bank that I'm not sure is a bank.
It's not.
That
It wasn't. I know
registered.
it wasn't a bank. It's Dennis Jocelyn. He named that company Beale Bank.
Yeah.
I
But
guess
in
to
any
give the
event, but
Jamaicans
ladies,
the impression
in
that
any
it's a
event,
bank.
whether it's a bank or a collection agency or anything in between, it was a mafia scheme designed to create the pretense of solving the Jamaica banking crisis
Financial
problem.
meltdown problem,
Yeah,
FINSAC.
it was to create a facade. It was a sham that resulted only in people losing their properties. Hardworking people's property were confiscated, right? The collateral that they used to borrow money was confiscated and then sold for less than their true value in order to enrich some people who will then go and resell them later on or use them for other developments and make themselves wealthy at the expense of the 44,000 persons who were
Plus the
destroyed by the
complex,
scheme.
yes.
Right? That's the bottom
Yes.
line.
That's the
Go ahead,
bottom
Ms.
line.
Dixon.
And the bottom line to all of this is that this goes back to 18th century Jamaica when laws were made to ensure that the free black man had no natural or civil rights.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that is why the laws were, I hope it's not gone too far now.
We know
The
the law.
laws
We can
between
summarize it, yes.
stripped black free emancipated black people. They were stripped of property. They were not allowed to own property because, as a throwback from slavery, property cannot own property. And I believe that that law is probably still on the books, because if you defied as a black person that law, you were stripped of the property, such as a top hat, a horse, a mule, a gelding, land, monies. Am I touching something there? Monies, and the animals were pounded and sold, and the proceeds were shared among those within the special class.
Again, Ms. Dixon, that's in your book there, right?
Sometimes, yes, or sometimes the proceeds would go to poor whites and brown people. Does anything there harken back to what has happened in this day, whatever date, 4th of February, 2023? That your property is confiscated because you are perceived as being property, and property cannot own property. So if you have monies, horse, land, whatever, how is that still reminiscent of today?
So
How many
basically,
years
nobody,
after?
they don't want us, we mustn't go past a certain level, eh? We mustn't go
That's
past
right,
a certain level.
because we are too black
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
succeed.
we mustn't go past a certain level.
No, we
must be-
can't pass with,
Right.
how would say,
And
can't
so
pass with this.
here is Mr. Bolt, for example, a
Yeah,
national
let's come now
icon.
down to nitty
And
gritty.
yes, man,
Let's
go ahead.
talk about
Talk
what
about
happened
that.
to him.
Talk about that. Yeah. Go ahead. Share your thoughts on that.
Well, the truth of the matter is, if a black man cannot own a top hat,
Mm-hmm.
a horse, a gelding, or whatever, back then,
Mm-hmm.
then don't you see it is possible for you to have brown people mainly who are of the ruling class, who make the laws, who could simply say, take that.
Mm-hmm. Or if you're a house slave, you get certain special privileges. So, for example, you might be black, and you're allowed certain level. So the majority of blacks can't pass a certain point,
Yeah.
and you have a few blacks now who occupy a special place in the house. Them get a little bit higher up. so them get to.
It reminds me of the saying, have you ever heard it? Man to
Yes.
man is unjust. Black man
Oh,
to black
yes.
man 10 times worse.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And you know, it is so sad,
But can I
Joseph.
tell you something, what I have been hearing, because if you read the agreement that was made between the then government and Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation, for every property that Jamaica Redevelopment Foundation sells, the government is supposed to collect 15%.
Call it what it is, get a kickback.
Yes. And remember,
But I understand that none of that 15% is being paid. So they got $323 million worth of property, paid $23 million for that. And the 15%, them just ride home in the sunset.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm telling you.
That's how our government do for your people. That's what they
Yes.
do for the people.
And
And
to
GLP,
think
PNP,
that
same
these are
shirt,
black
different
people.
color.
Yes. Now,
To
Miss
think
Dixon,
that
why?
these governments say that they are for the black people, and they have the best slogans: better must come,
Yes.
black man time now.
I know.
But they didn't tell you for who.
Yeah, which black man? Yeah, which black man? So, but what we know now, most of what we spoke about a while ago was around the PNP government, in the 1990s. Now, persons might get the impression that we're talking about the PNP and we're not talking about the GLP. But since the GLP came to office, how many times now they promised us the FINSAC report?
But Jola is now making it quite clear to me that there is no report.
There's no
Although
report.
I heard
I
that this
understand that
thing was
not even the
taken in a
first page
closed
has
box
been written.
with a padlock,
Let us
an
unpack
entourage,
this. Let us unpack
take
this
it
for
to
the
the
Jamaican
cell
people.
that it
Ms.
is
Dixon,
supposed to
let
be
us, Ms. Dixon,
imprisoned in.
let us back up and unpack this for the Jamaican people, right? Let's back up. The government commissioned a commission of inquiry to look into the banking crisis and the FinSAC arrangement and how this all pan out, to identify if there's anything that is untoward or whatever that may have happened. The taxpaying public was charged over $100 million for this commission to do its work. Could you remind me, Ms. Baker, when the commission started? Do you remember?
The FINSAC inquiry started, I think it was in 2008.
2008.
And went on 2011.
Until 11.
And that is the inquiry itself.
Right. So 2007, Bruce Golden was elected.
Right.
All right. PNP time done now. Bruce Golden was elected in 2007. Commission start in 2008. the PNP came back to power in did I get it right?
2000 and
did I have it right?
Yes,
no,
yes.
hold on.
2007, the inquiry began.
And
Yeah, the
2011,
JLP was in power then.
2011, the JLP lost. So the report was supposed to come out in 2011, right?
Right. No, the inquiry concluded. The inquiry went on for 2.5 years.
Right.
The inquiry concluded November 2011.
So watch me now. So the PNP demitted office in 2007, having 18 and a half years in office, over which they presided. They presided over the largest transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to the rich,
right.
to a few rich people. The JLP came in. The commission of inquiry began, as was announced. It ended in 2011, and then the report should come. The JLP lost the 2011 election, right? And the PNP resumed office for the one term of Portia Simpson Miller.
Right.
Where we were promised that we would get the report. It never happened. And the JLP returned to power in 2016.
Based on the promise that
they promised
would have been done.
Like the PNP before them, and like the JLP administration before the Andrew. So the Bruce administration, the Andrew, with Audley Shaw as the opposition spokesperson on finance, and then the Minister of Finance. They promised that they would deliver this report. 2016.
Yes,
they have been in office now from 2016 until 2022, and there is no report still. Why is there no report? Why do you think both sides have a vested interest in keeping this report from A, being written, and B, being published? Why are these two political parties hell-bent on ensuring we, the Jamaican people, do not see what happened, how it happened, and the real impact on the Jamaican people and the role of the government in it? Why, Miss Baker, you think them hold it from us?
Simply because it's same shirt, different color.
Same shirt, different color.
Different color, that's all.
And same
I have
shirt,
an article here.
Yes.
That is, it came out in the Gleaner on February 16, 2016. And it headlines, Holness puts Phillips in firing line over FINSAC. And it says, Jamaica Labour Party leader Andrew Holness last night fired back at People's National Party campaign director Peter Phillips for launching a smear campaign against him and politicizing his personal affairs with innuendos of illicit funding. Holness is also the opposition leader charged that Phillips and other members of the Simpson-Miller cabinet had questions of their own to answer about their acquisition of assets. He said Phillips, who is Jamaica's finance minister, should declare how he was able to afford his present residence while earning a similar salary to the opposition leaders, which, according to Holness, is valued at multiple times your salary, in quotes. Holness also took a swipe at Phillips and other members of the cabinet who in the mid to late 1990s presided over the collapse of Jamaica financial sector and established FINSAC as a mechanism for managing debts and assets. The opposition leader argued further that FINSAC took away the property of many hard-working Jamaicans and decimated the entrepreneurial class. Those who lost their properties because of government policies have a right to know if their ministers of government benefited from their loss.
Wow, beautifully said. Now hear this.
Need I say more?
Hear this.
Need I say more?
Notice what Mr. Holness talked about, assets being developed with the kind of salary that they were getting as
That's right.
no. They say when you live in a glass house, you mustn't do what?
Throw stones,
And
throw houses.
the very same words that he used against Mr. Phillips could apply to him,
Exactly.
because he has been. Let me not say any more about that. We all know the facts. We all know the facts. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. The people of
Just Mr.
Jamaica.
Patterson,
Yes,
this list here
yes.
is supposed to be a list of persons who supposedly got write-offs.
Hmm.
And there are some ministers there,
Oh
some
yeah.
government ministers on that list.
And now we understand, Yola and Joseph, why there can be no action or outrage,
For the
because
FINSAC
so
report.
many people will be embarrassed on both sides, but it needs to be. And I believe that I took action and wrote my family's experience and that of the 44,000 ordinary Jamaicans who were destroyed. Literally, Yola will tell you how that impacted. And what did Omar Davis do? He came and told the Jamaican people that the economy is flourishing. We have money galore in our pockets. And it was the fake money from the Carlos Hills and the David Smiths in their pyramid schemes. There was no real production, no real manufacturing, and there was nothing backing up the pyramid schemes. It was just a feel-good time. And we know how that ended.
I want to dig into that, Mr. Dixon, because it's a very important point you're raising here. In the 1990s into the early 2000s, we were told to log on to Progress. You recall?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we suggested that Jamaica was progressing. We had cell phones, and the Prime Minister, I remember in one of his campaign ads said, a man now have 2 cell phones. Him call himself.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You see how they ridicule the intelligence of black people?
Yes.
And then tell us that more man have more gal?
Yes.
And now we see the ages of the criminals who were the baby mothers.
Absolutely. And mind you, they created this intelligence or lack thereof that you're talking about.
That they're now proud to be done.
Yes. If you have an education system that fails 70% or more of your students every year, then you can't expect any better than this. You have lived a long time, well, relatively, and you would have seen how education in Jamaica has depreciated.
Wow.
I had the privilege not recently, about a couple of years ago, of reviewing the assignment of one student at the university, because I was giving her some advice and some help. And I said to her, let me see the paper that you're going to submit. She submit the paper to me. And when I read it, I said, my gosh, you can't submit this. This is not befitting of university level. And she said, what are you talking about, Mr. Patterson? Me get A and B all the time, A plus and B plus. I said, send me the paper, because I didn't believe her. Honestly, I didn't believe her. So I asked her to send me a few examples of papers where she got A plus and B plus. And when I read the paper,
you were embarrassed?
If a high school...
And this is at the university level?
University level. If a sixth form, if a grade 11 student had submitted that to me, it would be a failing paper from a grade 11 student. And that was from a university
student.
And she did get A. She did get A and B. I saw them. It was marked, and she got A. Plagiarism all over the thing, number one. I could tell. I mean, just by anybody who is basically read, you can quickly see that it's somebody else's work, cut and paste. And she did not have the ability to connect the sentences and paragraphs to make it fluid, to make it run, so it look kind of reasonable. It's just cut it and drop it, and the teacher, the lecturer who marked her paper, gave her A plus, B plus on those papers. I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and I said, my God, if this is what is coming out of our university, we're doomed. And right across the education sector, you ladies would have seen the constant decline in our education
Yes.
over the years.
And I cannot leave without saying this. Here I have written a book that outlines everything that underpins why our society is the way it is. And I have not received to this day one word from the Ministry of Education to even acknowledge that a book was placed in their hands for review. So it is a deliberate attempt to keep our people ignorant, and then they go into their garrisons, and when election time comes, they flush them out.
Absolutely.
We jump on bandwagons. I can stay from my yard when they're coming up, and it's pure excitement with motorcade to show you how them strong.
Yes.
And
where are the intellectuals, Mrs. Dixon? I'm always amazed. Like in the last
They
election,
migrated.
no, before they migrate, before them, the one them were there, because if you look at the voters list, we have 2 million people on the voters list. 2 million on the voters list. The last election, 1,943,000 on the voters list. Where are they on election day? Because on election day, the last election, 37% of that 1,943,000 came out and voted. 37%, of which the JLP got 21%, and the PNP got 14%, right? Or 16%. Now, where is the rest? I've been growing up in this country for years, and I hear a whole heap of talking and go on. Me hear bright people, Mutty Perkins. Tell me some of the names, some lovely names that they talk. Muta Baruka,
Mr. Mullins, Emily Crooks,
and they talk and talk and talk. You want to tell me, Mrs. Dixon and Mrs. Baker, that we don't have some better people in this country to run this country than what we've had for the last...
Well, Mr. Patterson, you have to understand, and I think you have had experience of it. Number one,
Yes.
the media is zipped. Their pens are zipped in certain
Bought and
sections
paid
because
for.
of sponsors.
Bought and paid for.
Bought and paid for.
Yeah.
So they're not raising
We
issues.
don't have any independent media in this country. We
No,
do
sir.
not have any investigative journalists in this country. All we have are PNP and GLP bought and
That's
paid
right.
for media personnel, pretending at times to suggest that they're fair and balanced and objective. But
You
we
can
digress
count
from
on one hand if
Yeah.
there are any objective journalists in Jamaica.
Yes.
I sent my book to a journalist, and when I saw how the person was clueless
Yes.
as to what was taking place, and they were big enough to have left high school, and they could not analyze what is happening in Jamaica. And yet our ministry is still insisting that our Jamaican students must be given foreigners who write books for them, and
Yes.
ignore our talented Jamaican authors.
I want to plug a word on that.
How much longer
I
are
have
we
read
going
this.
to have a Ministry of Education that, to my mind, is stuck in the Victorian era?
I have read this book, Mrs. Dixon. I just want to comment. I know it's your book, and by the way, people, I get no commission or no rewards for advertising this book. I want to tell you, none at all. But I have read this book. I have taken the time to read this book, and I know it was written primarily with the FINSAC experience as the objective, but I'm going to tell you what I got from this book. I got, in a few short pages, the book has a total of 233 pages. And in 233 pages, Mrs. Dixon summarized the history of Jamaica in a way that I have found no other author to have done. It gives you a really good appreciation for the path that we have taken as a country and how we get to the mess that we're in right now. She didn't write this from a political standpoint. You know, I'm the UIC and I stand for what the UIC stand for and so on. She wrote this as an honest Jamaican, trying to make sense of what has happened to her, her family, and thousands of us here in Jamaica. In fact, the entire 3 million of us. If you want a quick crash course on Jamaican history and how those we have trusted for the last 79 years have failed us, this is a great place to start. I highly recommend it. Too Black to Succeed, the FINSAC Experience by Miss Valerie Dixon. Get your copy today. You will not regret it. I have enjoyed reading every ounce of it, and not just enjoyed. It has connected some dots for me, reminded me of some things I wasn't aware of, and some that I was aware of, but not quite clear on. She really documented it very well. It's a very easy read, and every child in Jamaica should read this book.
But I have to say that I wish I could tell viewers when the time where to get this book. Would you believe me if I tell you that I had a contract with a bookstore, and they sold some of the books out of the consignment, and then we got a call saying to come and take the balance of books off of their shelves, and they won't be renewing the contract. What does that tell you?
Yep.
That the average Jamaican must remain dunce and ignorant and jump up on bandwagon every 5 years to get a rum, curry goat, and maybe a $5,000.
You know what I think?
Good God
I think
Almighty,
also,
this is
Mr.
what
Patterson,
Black
that
people, the neo-colonials, think of their citizens.
Jamaicans have literally given up
I think so too.
on even an effort, even to make an effort, because they're tired. They're
Yeah.
sick
I think
and
they are
tired.
punch
And
drunk.
they're tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
I think that's where
I
we're
think the Jamaican people to be honest with you, are very, very confused right now. You have three sets of people left in Jamaica. You have those who are still unbelievably die-hearted tribalists who are on one or the other bandwagon. A very small number. They account for about 30% or so of the Jamaican population. Then you have those who have just completely given up on Jamaica and can't wait for an opportunity to leave. If the moment they could get a visa for leave, that's it.
That's it.
They account for roughly another 60% of the nation. And then you have that 10% that has decided to just live with it, no matter what.
And what UIC needs to do, as one of your suggestions, is number one, to teach economics in schools. It must.
Absolutely. When we're the government, money, as a matter of fact, I'm going to close off now and share the summary, which includes what you're saying. So let me thank both of you ladies again for being on with us tonight. It was very experiential. It was very informative. I'm sure more and more Jamaicans have a better appreciation for what happened between 1990 and 2000 and how the government...
And still happening today.
And how to this very day, we have not been given a good understanding, a good publicly documented understanding of what happened. We have not learned from it, so we're repeating history to some degree in SSL, and we'll repeat it even more. But don't forget, all of you watching, don't forget that the real game changer here is that there's a hidden force which wants to control Jamaica's entire financial market, And they first of all got away with divesting the Bank of Jamaica without you even realizing it under the cover of COVID. And it just happened. I mentioned it, but not many people got wind of what's happening. And recently they passed new laws to get rid of competition in the space of microfinancing and to consolidate that. And now after this one now, they're going to fully consolidate the investment banking arena, the investment firm arena, and bring that all under a few hands, that the majority Black men and women will have no recourse but to beg and scrunch to be let into their little game. And you can only put your money in, but you can't own anything and you can't be a part of the big play. They're going to narrow the playing field, tighten the controls, and kick you out. In a few years, most Jamaicans will be tenants in their own country. Thanks again, Mrs. Dixon.
You're very welcome, Mr. Patterson. Thank you to Yola. You've
You're very
really been
welcome.
backing me up nicely
Thank you.
with the FinSAC information.
You must have another one, because I really would love to give you an idea of what should be done to start the education in the school system.
Absolutely.
You know,
I am ready for that. I'm ready for that.
Coming up soon, part 3, we'll have these two ladies back. And again, we thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom. Take care, have a good night, and I'll just finish up with the audience here. And again, we're going to come back with part 3 with these two lovely ladies. They're always giving us some great insights. But now I want to close off by just sharing with you briefly the UIC's high-level solution, right? Our high-level approach to all of this. I've seen the questions in the chat area. So here's our solutions. I believe it's time for us to say enough is enough. We're not going to allow the PSOJ oligarchy to use their big money machinery to trick us again into electing one of their foxes to guard our hen house. We're going to say enough is enough. No more. And for that to happen, we have to join hands and we have to fund and elect our own party, the People's Party, the UIC, instead of any of the other two colonial parties. It's not going to happen by magic. It's not going to happen by chance. It's going to happen by us deciding once and for all that we've had enough. And so we're going to come together, work together. It's not a Joseph Patterson thing. It's not me that I am going to go and do everything. I can't do it. But we can do it. If we pull together, all of us, in whatever form, whether we can donate, whether we can volunteer, whatever, but we have to pull together and we have to build a political movement which is owned by we the people, not owned by the PSOJ like the other two, where they use the big money to trick us over and over. We have to own the party now. We have to own the movement, whatever you want to call it, a party. We have to own the movement to get rid of the two colonial parties, to get rid of the colonial political system and so on. We also, as a result of this, we have to replace the colonial constitution and make Jamaica a true republic, not a fake republic like Guyana and Trinidad and Barbados and America. These are all fake republics. They're not true. We have to make sure Jamaica is a true republic. And for Jamaica to be a true republic, we have to enshrine in our constitution the full protection of our individual sovereignty and our collective independence. That's a given. There's no other way, right? So let's not be fooled. I know they're talking about constitutional reform committee and whatever. All they're going to do is play the game with us again. You see them start off with their back and forth and who, this, who, and so on. It's all a smokescreen, all a charade. And at the end of the day, they will give us a new constitution that is the old constitution with a few minor adjustments and a few window dressing, a few name changes, but the same substantive system will remain in place. Okay? In our approach, we're going to attack corruption and crime from the top down. So we're going to have a top-down approach where the real system of border security is put in place. I saw the Prime Minister now borrowing one more of our policy, and he's bringing the army in to deal with customs. Fine. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for authenticating our plans, but we know you're not going to do it properly. So yes, we're going to have a top-down approach. We're going to have real border security, including our army working in customs to stop the guns from coming in. We're going to have real community policing focused on prevention instead of, using a failed brute force reactionary approach. So our methodology is very different and very focused on not only serving and protecting, but respecting the Jamaican people. We're going to attack the economic problem from the bottom up. So crime, corruption from the top down, economic development from the bottom up. Our approach is going to make every Jamaican a property owner of our lands with full access to proper nutrition, proper education, affordable housing, and decent healthcare. This is going to ensure that the Jamaican people have the foundation, the property foundation, the asset foundation, the education foundation, the nutritional foundation to be successful from the get-go. We're going to make our education system an Afrocentric system, which is competency-driven and financial freedom focused. So our children are being taught and our people are being taught the truth about money and the global monetary system, and thus be empowered to fully manage their affairs and not be tricked by any future SSL or any future FINSAC possibilities, because now they would have had the information, the education, the technical competencies they need to control the politicians instead of being manipulated by them. Okay? We're going to make organic farming, modern organic farming, real community tourism, water harvesting, and renewable energy our competitive advantage as a country. Every country has a competitive advantage. Some countries are into mining, some are into technology, some are into auto industry and so on. I believe strongly that our economic advantage is in, first and foremost, organic farming, building a strong organic farming industry that will make Jamaica the organic food capital of the world. I believe that investing in real community tourism by making all of Jamaica look, smell, and feel like a tourist resort, and allowing the tourists to go fully into the heart of Jamaica, in the communities, and interacting with the people and sharing in our culture will be much better than what we have now. I believe we can properly capture and harvest water and sell water to the rest of the world when it is becoming a prized commodity. I strongly believe that if we invest in renewable energy, not only are we going to make ourselves, our country, water and energy secure, but we'll build our competencies and be able to consult and train and develop other countries in the Caribbean and Africa and around the world when it comes on to these core infrastructures of water, energy, and food. I want us to embrace and build a new healthcare system in Jamaica, one that puts preventive medicine at the top, first and foremost, by making our food our medicine number one and bringing back the knowledge of our herbs and natural remedies. I really want to take us on a journey where we take full advantage of modern medicine, but at the same time, we, reacquaint ourselves with using what we indigenously produce to heal ourselves. I believe nature is a powerful source of healing, and we just need to reconnect with nature, understand nature, and use nature in a way that makes us less reliant on the imported forms of medicine and the high cost of medicine by investing in knowledge, understanding, and harvesting and using the products we have here in Jamaica, the herbs, the natural remedies, and the missing knowledge that have been wiped out of us by our colonial education system. I believe strongly in teaching our parents and teachers how to discipline our children again with love and to cultivate good values and attitudes in our society by teaching and living good moral principles. We must find a better way, and there is a better way. We cannot have our schools continue to fall apart the way they are. We cannot continue to just adopt foreign ideas and foreign policies and not invest in really teaching our parents and teaching our teachers how to discipline with love and how to cultivate good values and good attitudes in our students, in our society, and by living those high moral standards in all that we do as a people. Let's bring back Jamaica. Let's rediscover who we are and not allow ourselves to continue down the slope that we have been on. Let's say enough is enough and do away with the colonialism and its divide and conquer partisan political system once and for all by making Jamaica a non-partisan constitutional republic. Let's become one Jamaica, united strong, and free. We can do it, we must do it, and I am sure we will do it when we elect a UIC government. It's late. I have gone 28 minutes over my time. So I'm going to say thank you very much for sharing the time with me, and I'll see you again